"Do you want to have dinner with us?" a little girl asked the lonely CEO, sitting alone on Christmas Eve. It was Christmas Eve and the city was alive, with lights, laughter, and the distant echo of carolers. But for Liam Bennett, nothing felt like celebration. He sat alone on a park bench, dressed in his tailored wool coat, meticulously polished shoes, and the unmistakable air of authority that came with being a young CEO. But his posture betrayed an emptiness that no luxury could fill. Around him, people hurried by with shopping bags and hot cocoa, their breath visible in the crisp winter air. He had declined his family's lavish holiday party months ago, opting instead for solitude, already weary of the hollow pleasantries and forced social niceties that had always accompanied wealth. He only wanted silence, a break from expectations, and yet his solitude felt like punishment. He closed his eyes and listened to the world carry on without him, convinced that this year, like so many before, would pass without meaning. Then, through the swirl of snowflakes, he heard soft feet approaching, tiny against the pavement. He opened his eyes to find a little girl standing before him, about 3 years old, with tousled golden curls peeking from a worn red coat, and bright blue eyes that seemed too full of hope for this world. She clutched a small paper bag, slightly crumpled, like a treasure. He opened his mouth to speak before she did. "Sir, do you want to have Christmas Eve dinner with me and my mommy?" she asked, her voice so clear and earnest that it cut through Liam's numbness like a bell. Her question was disarming in its innocence, presenting a genuine offer where he expected none. He blinked, startled. Before he could answer, she reached out and took his hand, tugging gently, yet with surprising strength. It happened so quickly that he didn't have time to refuse. Which part of him let her pull him to his feet, like a child dragging a guest home for Christmas dinner? He did not know. He found himself standing, the cold biting at his cheeks, his suit trousers brushing fresh snow, yet he felt warmer than he had in months. They walked down the bustling avenue together, her little coat brushing against his leg, her hand tucked into his. Pedestrians glanced at the pair, an incongruous tableau of wealth and innocence. Some smiled, others whispered, but as they passed the glow of holiday store windows and manicured trees, Liam's world shifted. He realized that this small act, a child offering company to a lonely man, felt more like a gift than any he had ever received. They turned onto a side street, the kind lined with small apartment buildings and warm yellow lights and curtained windows. It looked nothing like the grand mansions Liam was used to, but somehow it felt more like home in that moment than anything else ever had. He glanced down to say something, to remind the girl she was a stranger with a stranger, but she simply smiled up at him and squeezed his hand again, as if confirming the adventure they were on. Time slowed. The city's noise faded behind them. The snow-covered street seemed silent except for their footsteps. The little girl stopped in front of a modest building, whose brick facade was decorated with a single wreath and a string of twinkling lights. She jumped forward. "Right here, sir. This is where we live." The door opened before she could knock, and a woman with weary blue eyes and golden hair in a loose braid stood framed by soft light, holding a small suitcase of groceries. She looked at Liam for a heartbeat, surprise, caution, gratitude, all in an instant. "Emma," the girl said proudly, "this is the man who's coming to eat Christmas dinner with us." Emma looked at Liam and said nothing at first, but her eyes softened and she stepped aside. "Come in," she said quietly, and held the door open for him. Liam hesitated, then followed, closing the door behind. Inside, the apartment smelled of roast chicken and warm bread. A small table was set with mismatched dishes, and a single candle flickered in the center. The low light cast cozy shadows across walls adorned with Sophie's crayon drawings. The little girl ran to the table, climbed into a chair, and patted the seat across from her, looking up at Liam with serious eyes. His breath caught. He sank into the chair, hands resting on his knees, unsure what to say, but aware he could not look away. Emma moved quietly, placing a plate of chicken and vegetables in front of him, then seated herself beside her daughter. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then the little girl said softly, "Merry Christmas, sir." Emma offered a gentle smile, a real one, not the practiced politeness he was used to. Liam found himself saying Merry Christmas, his voice husky from emotion he had buried. They ate slowly, the three of them sharing food and warmth and presents. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, around that small candle-lit table, Liam understood for the first time that Christmas was not about grand parties or the expectations of a wealthy family. It was about connection, about being seen, and about belonging. In that moment, his world, once vast and empty, felt full again. The apartment was small, the kind of place most people walked past without noticing. A crooked string of twinkling lights framed the front window, casting a soft glow on the cracked sidewalk below. Liam followed Sophie up the narrow stairs, his polished shoes tapping against creaky old wood. At the top, she turned with a smile. "This is our home." Before Liam could respond, the door opened. A woman, young, mid-20s, with golden hair loosely braided over one shoulder, stood in the doorway. Her eyes were kind but tired, and she clutched a kitchen towel in one hand. She paused, surprised to see him. Sophie beamed. "Mommy, this is the man I told you about. He looked lonely, so I invited him to dinner." The woman's gaze flicked from her daughter to Liam. No fear, just quiet, maternal caution. Liam tried to speak, to explain himself, but words didn't come. I hope it's not too much trouble," he managed. There was a brief silence, then she stepped aside. "Come in." The scent of rosemary and roast chicken drifted through the air. The apartment's living room and kitchen shared one small space. A modest table by the window held two mismatched plastic plates, a chipped bowl of vegetables, and a candle tilting slightly in its holder. On the floor stood a tiny artificial Christmas tree, glowing softly under handmade ornaments and crayon-colored stars. She returned to the counter, slicing chicken in practiced silence. No questions, no hesitation. Just a third plate placed gently on the table. Sophie hopped into a chair, her feet swinging beneath. "Mommy makes the best chicken ever." The woman glanced up and smiled, small, genuine. "It's not much, but you're welcome." Liam hesitated. He didn't eat with strangers, he didn't accept casual kindness, but something in her voice, soft, unguarded, made refusal impossible. He sat. She served him quietly. The food was plain, but warm, real, and somehow it filled something deeper than hunger. They ate in near silence, broken only by Sophie's giggles and stories about her imaginary snowman friend, Sir Sprinkle. Liam found himself smiling, his shoulders relaxing. For once, he wasn't calculating or defending or proving. Anna, he would later learn her name, caught him watching Sophie and said, "She always likes the candle, even if it's just us. Says it makes dinner special." Liam looked at the candle's glow, casting gentle shadows. It reminded him of holiday dinners growing up, tables full of food but silent, cold. Formal meals with silver and crystal, but no laughter. Anna quietly refilled his plate. When he started to protest, she waved him off. "You look like someone who hasn't had a proper meal in a while," she said kindly. Liam said nothing. She was right, but not the way she thought, because for the first time in years, he realized it wasn't food he had been hungry for. It was this. A small table. A warm plate. Two people who weren't asking for anything in return. As he sat in that modest kitchen, a man of wealth and influence among crayon drawings and paper stars, Liam felt something settle inside him, something that had long been drifting, unsure where it belonged. And when Sophie leaned against her mother and looked up at him with sleepy eyes and a quiet smile, like he had always been meant to sit at that table, Liam felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Hope. After dinner, the dishes were cleared in quiet collaboration. Liam offered to help, but Anna only smiled, shaking her head gently. "You're the guest tonight," she said, stacking the plates carefully in the tiny sink. Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up beneath a fleece blanket, her cheeks still flushed from excitement and cake. The apartment felt even smaller now, but cozier. Outside the window, snow fell in lazy spirals, painting the city in silence. Liam sat back down at the table, his suit jacket folded over the back of the chair, his hands resting idly in front of him. He did not want to leave yet. Not because he owed them anything, but because something here made it hard to walk away. Anna finished rinsing the last plate, wiped her hands and joined him again. She poured 2 mugs of tea, cheap, overly floral, but Liam welcomed the warmth. "She's a good kid," he said softly, nodding toward the sleeping Sophie. "She's everything," Anna replied, her voice quieter now. There was a pause, then Liam asked, "How long have you been on your own?" Anna looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "Since I was 21. Liam waited. "I was in college," she said. "Studying education. Wanted to teach literature, maybe run a classroom with paper stars on the ceiling. I met someone, older, charming, said all the right things, and I believed him." He heard the unspoken words in her tone, believed him, got pregnant, was left behind. "My parents weren't thrilled," she continued. "They said I was throwing my life away. When I said I was keeping the baby, they said they couldn't support my decision. I moved out 2 days later." She took a sip of tea, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. "I waited for him to come back. He never did." "You raised her on your own?" Liam asked. Anna nodded. "I've waitressed, cleaned houses, answered phones, whatever pays the bills, but I never regretted Sophie." There was no bitterness in her voice, no anger, just tired honesty and the resilience of someone who had no choice but to keep going. Liam stared at her, quiet. Her story was nothing like his, yet somehow it resonated. "You ever get angry?" he asked, surprising himself with the softness in his voice. "At life? At them?" Anna met his gaze. "Of course. But I learned something early. Anger eats more than it feeds. It doesn't fix what's broken." Then, with the faintest smile, "There's no point blaming the weather, you just find a better coat." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Then he said, "My family's rich, like private jets, gala dinners, legacy name-on buildings, rich. But my mother hasn't hugged me since I was 10. My father sees me as a failure because I didn't take over his empire. I started my own company when I was 18 and didn't speak to them for 3 years." Anna didn't respond immediately. She listened, really listened, and when he finished, she reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. "Maybe they love you," she said. "They just never learned how to show it." Liam's eyes searched hers. There was no pity in them, only warmth, and a quiet kind of understanding that unraveled something deep inside him. He nodded once. For years he had hidden that wound beneath layers of success and control, and now here it was, seen and soothed, not with solutions, but with compassion. In a tiny kitchen lit by the last flickers of a candle, Liam felt the world shift again, not in grand gestures, but in a woman's calm voice, a cup of tea, and a hand that said, "You are not alone," and somehow that was enough. The days that followed were quieter, slower, and strangely warm despite the biting winter air. Liam began stopping by more often, not out of obligation, and certainly not out of curiosity anymore. Something had shifted in him that night over tea and candlelight, and now the small apartment with the mismatched plates and the paper Christmas tree felt like the one place in the city where he could breathe. Sometimes he brought small things, a box of pastries from a bakery downtown, a children's book Sophie might like. One afternoon, he noticed the kitchen light flickering and returned the next day with a new bulb and a step stool, insisting on fixing it himself. Anna always thanked him, he always waved it off. "I'm not doing this to be polite," he said once, after helping her carry a box of laundry up the stairs. "I'm doing this because I want to." Anna smiled, her eyes softening. Their conversations grew longer, easier. Sometimes they'd talk while Sophie played nearby, building towers out of cereal boxes or drawing Liam in crayon with a comically large nose. Other times, Liam would help Sophie with her puzzles while Anna prepared dinner, and the three of them would eat together like it had always been that way. One late afternoon, snow began to fall heavily. Liam called to say he would stop by, just to bring a few things he thought Sophie might like. He arrived at their door with a small paper bag and a familiar glint in his eyes. Anna opened the door, surprised. "You're going to catch a cold walking around in this weather," Liam smiled. "Worth it." He stepped inside, pulled something carefully wrapped in tissue paper from the bag, and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked, unwrapping the soft fabric slowly. It was a scarf, a cream-colored knit with delicate stitching. Thick, warm, elegant, and clearly hand-chosen. She froze. "This looks like—" She trailed off. Liam nodded. "You mentioned it once, when you were folding clothes, said you lost one just like it on the subway a few years ago. You looked sad for a second, then laughed and said it was silly to miss a scarf." Anna stared at the scarf, then at him. Her throat tightened. "You remembered that?" He didn't look away. "I don't remember much these days. Most people talk and I forget what they said 2 minutes later. But I remembered that." He stepped closer, his voice softer now. "You're the first person I've wanted to remember." Anna blinked quickly, her hands tightening slightly around the scarf. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. She only nodded, slowly, like trying to keep everything inside from spilling out. It was not a grand declaration, not a dramatic scene, just a man standing in a small hallway offering something quietly precious, a scarf, a memory, a message unspoken but deeply heard. After that, the rhythm of their little triangle became more natural. Liam would visit after work, sometimes with food, sometimes just to read with Sophie. Once he showed up with ingredients and insisted on cooking. His pasta sauce was mediocre at best, but Sophie clapped like he was a magician. Anna sat at the table, watching him fumble in the kitchen with an expression halfway between amusement and something much softer. She never said she was falling for him. He never said it either. But it was in the way she looked up every time the door opened, already expecting him. The way he lingered longer each visit, never in a rush to return to his high-rise. The way Sophie called him "our Liam" when talking to her stuffed animals. And then there was the scarf, folded neatly beside the door, worn every time she left the house. A small detail, a silent signal. They were becoming something, together, not through grand gestures or sweeping romance, but through small, quiet choices. The scarf, the fixed light bulb, the extra plate at the table. Love in its truest form was arriving gently and staying. 3 days had passed since Christmas, but the seasons still lingered. Some apartment windows still glowed with lights, and a few storefronts hadn't yet swapped their displays for New Year's banners. In a modest apartment on the 4th floor, the little plastic tree continued to blink in the corner, stubbornly holding on to what was left of the holiday. That evening, after a quiet dinner, Sophie fell asleep on the couch beside her mother, her arms curled around a stuffed snowman. Anna and Liam remained at the kitchen table, a candle flickering between them, its light casting long shadows on the chipped wood. Anna traced the rim of her mug in silence. Then, almost to herself, she said, "Christmas never really felt like it was mine." Liam looked up, listening. "When I was a kid, we didn't have much. No tree, just a string of half-lit lights taped to the window. My mom would cut out a picture of a Christmas tree from a magazine and tape it to the wall. One year we wrapped tinsel around a broom and called it our Christmas stick." She gave a small laugh. I tried to believe it was enough. She looked over at Sophie, sleeping, her voice quieter. "After I got pregnant, I spent her first Christmas alone, just the two of us, in a rented room with no heat. I held her all night, trying to hum carols and pretend it was magical. I didn't have money for a single gift." Liam's chest tightened. "I've done what I can," she said. Each year I make it a little better. I found that little tree at a thrift store. It's missing a leg, so I tape it to the wall. Sophie doesn't know. To her, it's enough." She paused. "But I know what's missing." Liam glanced toward the plastic tree blinking faithfully in the corner. Paper ornaments, crayon drawings, bent star at the top. It was full of love, but it wasn't whole. "She's never had a real one?" he asked. Anna shook her head. "Not once." That night, after Anna had dozed off beside her daughter, Liam slipped out into the snow. The next morning, as always, Sophie was the first to wake. She padded toward the door, eager to see if any more snow had fallen, and then her delighted scream. "Mommy! Come quick! Mommy!" Anna rushed out, startled, only to freeze at the door. There, just outside, stood a small pine tree, fresh, dusted with snow, its branches wrapped in white lights and dotted with silver bells. A red scarf had been tied around its base, like a blanket. At the top, a handmade gold paper star leaned slightly to the side. Underneath were 3 neatly wrapped gifts in brown paper, tied with red string. Sophie danced in circles. "He came! Mommy, Santa really came!" Anna crouched down, her eyes filling as she reached for a small envelope taped to one of the boxes. In familiar handwriting, it read, "For Sophie, from your secret Santa." She didn't need to ask. She already knew. She looked down the hallway, half expecting Liam to be standing there with that casual, quiet smile. But there was only silence, the scent of pine, and the soft chime of bells swaying in the morning breeze. Anna touched the tree, fingers gently brushing its cold, green needles. For years she had tried to make magic out of nothing, pretended she wasn't watching life through a window she couldn't open, but now someone had opened it for her. Inside, the old plastic tree blinked in the corner, but it was no longer the center. Outside, a man had given her child what she never had, not through extravagance, but through kindness. Presence, a silent promise, fulfilled. And for the first time in her life, Anna felt Christmas truly arrive. By March, the city had shed most of its winter coat. Snow had melted into slush, and the air carried the promise of spring. In a modest apartment with hand-drawn decorations and paper butterflies taped to the windows, a certain little girl was counting down the days to something she had never truly experienced before, her very first birthday party. Sophie was turning 4. To most, it might seem like a small milestone, but for Anna it was everything. It was the first year she could afford a cake, the first year Sophie had made friends at the neighborhood daycare, the first year her daughter would get to wear a princess dress, not borrowed but chosen. And for Sophie, the biggest excitement of all was one name she kept repeating with glee: Chew Liam. Liam had promised. "I'll be the first one at your door," he told Sophie with a pinky swear. 8 o'clock sharp, with a surprise. Anna had watched him make that promise, her heart full and wary all at once. He was good to them, consistently, thoughtfully good, but a part of her still lived in the quiet fear of being left behind again. 2 days before the party, Liam's phone rang during a board meeting, Singapore. A high-stakes merger. The opposing CEO had changed schedules last minute. He would only meet in person, and only on Sophie's birthday. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. He stood up without a word and walked straight out of the room. That night he called Anna. "I might not make it back in time," he said, voice low. "The meeting's the same morning. I'm trying to move things, but—" Anna didn't interrupt. She listened, then replied gently, "You've already done so much." But then, softer, "It's just, she sees you as family now, Liam. This birthday, she's not waiting for toys. She's waiting for you." Liam sat in silence long after the call ended, heart heavy, torn between duty and desire. March 17th, Sophie's birthday. Back in New York, Anna had woken early. The apartment smelled of sugar and strawberry frosting. Balloons clung to the walls, and Sophie twirled in her lavender dress, her hair clipped back with glittering pins. "Is he coming soon?" she asked for the 3rd time in an hour. Anna knelt, adjusting the hem of her daughter's dress. "He said he'd try." Sophie tilted her head. "But he promised." Anna didn't respond. Her eyes stung and she turned away to hide it. Meanwhile, across the world, Liam sat alone in a luxury hotel suite in Singapore. He had finished the meeting earlier than expected. Everything had gone well, the deal was secured, and yet he didn't feel anything close to satisfaction. On the table in front of him sat a small velvet box. Inside, a delicate silver bracelet engraved with tiny cursive letters, "Sophie and Mommy, my home forever." He stared at it for a long moment, then walked to the window. The city stretched beneath him, glowing with possibility, but all he could think about was a 4-year-old girl in a lavender dress waiting by the door. His chest tightened. "What am I doing here?" he murmured, "when everything I want is somewhere else?" Without hesitation, he picked up his phone, canceled his remaining meetings, and called his assistant. "Rebook my flight," he said. "I'm going home." Hours later, the apartment was buzzing with kids and noise. Paper crowns and frosting-smeared cheeks filled the room. Anna kept glancing at the clock, her smile beginning to fade. It was nearly evening when the doorbell finally rang. Anna opened it to find Liam standing there, wind-blown, out of breath, and holding the velvet box in his hand. Sophie spotted him from across the room and screamed with joy. "You came," she shouted, launching herself into his arms. "I promised," he whispered, hugging her tightly. Anna watched them from the doorway, eyes glistening. He looked at her and smiled, quietly placing the box in her hand. She opened it. Her fingers trembled. Liam leaned close, his voice gentle. "I missed the cake, but I made it to what matters." And just like that, the day became perfect. Not because of the cake or the gifts or the party, but because a promise had been kept and two hearts that had never truly believed in constancy finally did. The sun had begun its slow descent by the time Liam reached the familiar doorstep. He stood there for a moment, staring at the door he had come to know so well. In his hand was a small gift box, wrapped simply with a navy blue ribbon. He had not called ahead. He had not sent a message. Something in him needed this to be real, not scheduled, not arranged, just him, arriving because he wanted to be there. He took a breath and knocked softly. Inside the apartment, Sophie was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, her toy kitchen sets spread around her in cheerful chaos. She looked up at the sound of the knock, froze for a beat, and then shrieked with joy. "Mommy! It's him! It's Liam!" She bolted to the door just as Anna stepped into the hallway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Her eyes widened as the door opened and Liam stood there, wind-tussled and quietly smiling. "Uncle Liam's back!" Sophie yelled, running back into the apartment. "Mommy, the table has 3 chairs again. I can cut the cake now." Anna's expression softened, touched by surprise and something deeper. Liam stepped inside, removed his coat, and looked down for a moment. Then he placed the box gently on the small kitchen table. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low but steady, "for nearly missing it, for not always knowing where I belong." He looked up and met her eyes. "But if there's still space here, I'd like to sit at this table again and not miss another birthday." Anna didn't speak right away. The room was filled with the hum of the heater, the soft clink of Sophie's plastic teacups. The scent of leftover frosting lingered in the air. Then, quietly, Anna stepped forward. Her eyes glistened, but she smiled, soft, sure, steady. "There's always space for you here," she said. "Your seat's never been taken." That evening, the 3 of them sat down at the table, no cake ceremony, no party hats, just a warm dinner Anna had reheated, and a sense of peace that wrapped around them like a worn, beloved blanket. Sophie chattered nonstop about the day, about her friends, about the crown that kept falling off her head during the song. Liam listened, laughing softly, refilling her juice like it was the most important job in the world. Anna watched them both, her heart fuller than she could express. After dinner, as Sophie dozed off against Liam's shoulder on the couch, Anna brought him a cup of tea. They sat in the quiet, their words no longer necessary. Liam looked at the little girl nestled against him, then at Anna, who was watching her daughter with a calm, contented gaze. He thought of all the dinners he had skipped in high-rising restaurants, the holidays spent with strangers in suits, the deals that had consumed his time. And then he looked at this moment, soft, real, quiet, and something clicked inside him. This was home. Not because he owned it, not because he had earned it, but because he was wanted here. Because two people, one who didn't understand anything beyond the joy of cake and hugs, and one who had been quietly carrying the weight of the world, had let him in. He didn't need permission. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. This was his seat, and the table was no longer empty. 1 year later, everything felt different. Not because Liam Bennett had stepped back from the boardroom, or because his company had broken records, not because Anna had begun teaching music part-time at the local community center, not even because Sophie now ran through their rooms like a living spark. It was because they were together. After months of shared meals, bedtime stories, quiet walks, and noisy pancake mornings, Liam, Anna, and Sophie moved in together. Not into a penthouse, but into a cozy sunlit apartment with creaky floors and windows that let in golden afternoon light. In the corner stood a tall Christmas tree, decorated in gold and white, with crooked paper stars made by Sophie dangling near the bottom. Liam often stood before it with coffee in hand, Sophie perched on his hip as she added yet another handmade ornament. He had never loved a tree more. Days before Christmas Eve, Liam did something unexpected. He invited Anna and Sophie to dinner with his parents, the first invitation in over a decade. Anna looked unsure. "Are you sure about this?" "I want them to meet the people who made me whole," he said. They went. The Bennett's home was still grand, cold marble, tall ceilings and long silences, but this time something had changed. Liam's mother greeted Anna not with words, but with a soft pour of tea and a quiet nod. His father, usually reserved, placed a small silver tin in front of Sophie. Inside were soft caramel candies. Her eyes lit up. "My favorite!" Liam caught the slight curve of his father's lips. Not quite a smile, but something close. No apologies, no grand reconciliations, just small gestures. Enough. When they left, hearts were lighter, and Liam felt something loosen inside him. Then came Christmas Eve. The apartment filled with the scent of cinnamon and roasted vegetables. Snow drifted outside. Inside, lights twinkled, laughter echoed, and the world felt full. They invited neighbors, single moms, quiet retirees, the widower next door who always fed the birds. It was not lavish, but it was warm and alive. Sophie wore a glittery green dress, cheeks rosy, darting between guests like a star on the move. Liam watched Anna from across the room, her red dress, her easy smile, the way she moved like she belonged in joy. He reached into his pocket, touching the velvet box tucked inside. Later, when the music softened and the laughter faded to murmurs, Liam stood and took Anna's hand. He led her to the middle of the room, beneath the tree. Sophie followed, but stopped, sensing something different. Liam turned, then knelt, not to perform, but to honor. Anna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He opened the box, one diamond, simple and elegant. But it was not the ring that moved her. It was what he said. "I used to think Christmas was about grand parties," he whispered. "But then you let me in. You fed me at your tiny table. You made me laugh again. You gave me the one thing I thought I'd never have, a seat beside you." He looked at Sophie, now bouncing in place. "You didn't know it, but you were writing the song I didn't know my life needed." He stood, took both their hands. "With you, I found home." Sophie squealed, "Say yes, Mommy! Say yes!" Tears filled Anna's eyes. She nodded, smiling through them. "Yes," she whispered. The room erupted in soft applause. Liam kissed Anna's forehead, then held her hand on one side, Sophie's on the other. Under the lights of the tree, the three of them stood, a small family, full of grace and joy. Outside, snow began to fall again, and inside, Liam finally understood what it meant to belong. Sometimes, a simple invitation, a tiny hand, or a seat at a small dinner table is all it takes to change a life forever. Liam walked into that Christmas Eve alone, but he walked out with something far greater than success or wealth. He found love, belonging, and a home in the hearts of two people who had nothing to offer, but everything that truly mattered. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe, like, and share this video. And don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss another story that stirs the soul. Thank you for being here. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful families begin not with blood, but with an open heart and an empty chair.